So we've got a GSX-R. Owner just put a new swing arm on it, making some grinding noises. First thing we notice is that the chain's a little wobbly. The sprocket's actually the wobbling part. Made sure that it was seated in the push drive nicely. Check it on the truing stand. It runs nice and true when we do that. Put it back on the motorcycle. Use anti-seize because we have some non-ferrous fasteners on here. Some fancy stuff. Super lightweight, but you have to make sure that you don't have galling between the dissimilar metals. Always use your torque. And it's a little straighter, still a little wobbly. What this means is that the bearing's not seated nicely in the push drive carrier, but that does not seem to be the cause of our noise. Customer also, the swing arm came with a lowering built into it. He was a little lower than he liked, so we pointed out that he has a adjustable Penske shock on there. Adjusted it up a little bit. Took it out for a ride. No real change from those changes. It's a grinding noise. I suspected at the very beginning. I asked him if he had rub blocks on there. There are some rub blocks built into the swing arm. I suspected that's what it was, but of course we've got to confirm everything because you actually can't see the noise happening per se. You can see the chains moving around a little bit, but we're going to check and make sure that there aren't any witness marks of any contact going on up inside where, I don't know, I've seen nuts and bolts dropped in there. Bad things can happen. All looks good. No signs of rubbing. And the owner didn't have this part apart when he was doing it, so mostly we're just looking for foreign objects. The other thing we asked the owner was about the swing arm. He just kind of took the old axle, or the old pivot shaft out and stuck it back in. So we looked it up the spec and adjusted it per factory specification to make sure that there wasn't some side-to-side motion at the pivot of the swing arm, because Suzuki, as well as most sport bikes, have an adjustment that takes up the slack on the side before it gets torqued. It seemed like it was good, didn't seem like it was make a difference, but take a quick little test drive in the parking lot just to make sure. And this is the opening clip from the video, but as you can see, oh, noise still there. It's not just the Suzuki that has this problem. This is one of those cases where sometimes aftermarket parts might not be made for the purpose that you plan on using them for. This is another example right here. This customer wanted to buy a trike, so he got himself the least expensive trike kit he could find, and we found some engineering flaws with it, and it relates exactly to what's going on with that GSX-R we were just working on. This one right here, you can see, go ahead and shine down there, the belt sitting here in this position right here, belt's pretty good. That's about the correct tension for a belt on a Harley-Davidson dresser. But this bike is good to demonstrate on because it has an air ride. This is all the way down. When you actually make the bike go up to an actual rideable ride height where you have a suspension and movement in the shocks, so you're not feeling every single bump and bump. As it goes up, it just keeps getting looser and looser. To where with it all the way up, you can see, I mean, this belt is sloppy. We bring it back down. It goes back to a good adjustment. So really, belts need to be run at a certain tension, chains need to be run at a certain tension too, or they'll skip teeth. it needs to be run at a certain tension or it can actually be damaging to the belt. So this is just one of those cases where when the manufacturer designed this swing arm, they started it at a point already in the part of its travel. I can demonstrate this using this visual aid. This is the swing arm. This is the rear sprocket. This is the front sprocket. The distance that between the front sprocket that the chain goes around and the rear sprocket that the chain or belt goes around is going to be the longest when the swing arm is straight. So you can see with these 3 points in line, so everything's straight, we've got a fair amount of tension on this little piece of string here. As we go, and in the case of this trike, we make the suspension taller, you can see it just gets sloppy because the distance between these 2 points, this is trigonometry for you guys that thought you weren't going to use this after you got out of school, this distance actually gets quite a bit shorter than it is here. Now in the case of the Suzuki, so this is what the trike is doing. When it's sitting all the way down, it's in a straight line, so it's as tight as it's going to get. As you raise it up to give yourself some suspension travel, it just gets looser and looser. Our Suzuki is actually going the other way, and it's starting already in a tight position, and then as you give it power or go over a bump, it's actually compressing the suspension, and once again getting looser and looser and looser, which makes that chain, as you can see, that chain would be sloppy and allowed to hit swing arms and things like that and actually make that noise. So that's what's actually going on. Since this is going through an arc, this distance from here to here is changing as the suspension goes up and down. So it's loose, tight, and loose on both sides. As the manufacturers design it, it's usually going to start with a down angle on the swing arm. So as you go through the beginning of travel, it gets tight, and then as you go through the next part of travel, it gets a little looser, but it stays within a pretty consistent range. But when you get some aftermarket parts that either start you in the middle or start you already in one side or another and only go one direction, that's when you start to run into problems with drive slack. Take it out for a ride, a little bit longer ride, to see if I can get a witness mark to make sure exactly where it's hitting. And after doing 6 miles, come back and it actually seems to be hitting right there on the front. So as I suspected, it is a chain issue, and now we're just going to tighten the chain up incrementally in steps, measure, make sure that the chain doesn't get any tighter. That saw the bike come down. Ace put some pressure on the back. That's the other thing you'll kind of notice from this, is that when you put a longer swing arm on, Ace was able to push down on that pretty easily, because a longer swing arm makes the shock spring act lighter. You've got more leverage on the swing arm, so you really need a stiffer shock spring to go along with it. Do our adjustments, torque everything back up. Now, I'll admit that that chain adjustment right there is a little cringeworthy when it's fully tight, about 8 millimeters, about the thickness of the chain, but it is a brand new chain, so I know it's going to stretch. And we made sure that it only gets looser and never gets tighter. Sometimes this is the sort of adjustment over and over and over again that you've got to do. When you've got these aftermarket parts, to try and make it as best as it possibly can be, and you won't always be able to fix it perfectly. The other thing we did was look up the spec on the Penske shock. You're allowed to have 12 millimeters of thread showing on that adjuster. We put it at 11.56 millimeters of thread showing. So noise went away. We'll give it back to the customer, and he'll deal with his choices.